if you are reading materials on the internet, those are local content, those are content. And as you know, you can actually do translate now on most of the web pages that you have. You can translate. If it's not in English, you can translate it in English. If it's not in another language, you can do translate. So local content, and I want to tell you that local content is dependent on the community. Once the community feels they want it, so we are not talking about the content of the page now. We're talking about the technical standards. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So the technical standards ensure that there is a consistent performance of products, processes, and services. This presentation aims to raise awareness over the need for internet standards to continue becoming more inclusive and also be more implemented correctly. So we're talking about standards, okay? We're not talking about local content. The content depends on the local community. Publishing line for their presentation and engagement. So the local content, the content of every web page is dependent on the community. If you are a Spanish-speaking community and you are posting material in English, then you are not promoting your language. You have to be posting material. So we're not talking about the other one today. We're talking about the technical standard. We're talking about the architecture behind the internet itself. Then one of the critical things, okay, when we are talking about domain, before I get to that, we've understood that English is not the most widely spoken. And as you can see, the internet has a future. The future of the internet, if you look at the diagram clearly, you will see that where you have all these spaces, this is where people are living, but less people are using the internet. And as you can see, Africa has the most white cities. And that is why the next global internet users are supposed to come from Africa, because it's where people that are not yet connected to the internet, majority are not yet connected to the internet. And in order for them to connect to the internet, we need to ensure that the internet speaks their language. So in terms of local content, when you are posting, it's better you post in the local language so that local people will be able to read. Because when you see somebody that speaks your language, for those of you that have gone abroad, when you are abroad, that you are in another man's land, if you hear somebody speak your language, you will look twice at who is this person, because there is that affinity. Or if you are in a community whereby you have very few people speaking your language, if you hear somebody speak your language, you would look at, oh, who is this person speaking my language? And if there is a problem, you will want to ask that person, oh, how can I solve this problem? Because you feel this person is my brother or this person is my sister because you speak the same language. That's the same thing with the internet. If you feel that the internet is not speaking your language, then you feel that the internet does not belong to us. And that is why local content is important. And like I said, I'm not going to dwell so much about local content. Universal acceptance is not about local content. It's about the engineering structure behind it. So when you look at it, and let me start by explaining this, that during this presentation, I will not majorly talking about languages. Okay? Because, for example, there are some language that are written in English character. Okay? They are written in English character. Those languages does not have a problem because they are written in A, B, C, D to Z. Okay? So it is not about language per se. It is about what character that language is using to write. So if your language, for example, is written in A to Z, then that is not a problem. It still can be said it's in English, but it's not in English, but it's in English alphabet A to Z, okay? That is not much of a problem. But there are some languages that are not written in the usual English character, the usual ASCII character. Let me just say ASCII. Okay? And those ones, this is where the problem is. You can see, for example, the Japanese vowel, the way it looks like, okay? All these other languages, the way they look like, okay? They are not in those normal A, B, C, D characters, okay? And so language is a system of communication. Ordering string and words originates the meaning. And all these things matters. You need to put those strings together in order for it to have a meaning. So when we were doing computing, early computing started with what we call the ASCII. And what you do when you're doing computing is you convert from whatever it is to zeros and one. As you all know, computer only understands zeros and one. So if you have an A is converted into zeros and one. B2 is converted into zeros and ones. Okay? But the computer only understands zeros and one, and only understand you can only convert those A to Z. So computer functions, okay, work with numbers, not letters. So to produce each character, you need to have like a chart that converts it. For example, A can be 0101. That's just an example. If A is 0101, okay, that is the way the computer is represented. And it is just the way the computer is represented. So the computer only understands zeros and ones, no other thing apart from zeros and ones. So every character, for example, A is represented by this zeros and one character, and B2 is represented, and we have them as in the early days. We use what we call the ASCII characters, and ASCII only consists of A to Z and 0 to 9. Those are the only ASCII characters. So for the computer, those numbers were only done for A to Z and 0 to 9. And that is what the computer was using. And that is the base of computing. It is just 0 to 1, A to Z, that the ASCII character could translate into zeros and ones. But as things goes on, okay, we started discovering that we don't have, even if you want to write in Mandarin, for example, now, or in the Japanese vowels. Look at these vowels now. How do you represent them? Okay, sometimes they represent them with English character, but that is not the original thing. So we now decided that rather than having ASCII, we want to have what we call the Unicode. So the Unicode is a technical standard that enables consistent usage of writing systems in computer system, of writing in systems. Around 150 characters, including emojis, are now being used when we're using Unicode. So Unicode can have all these characters, including those Japanese vowels, including all those ones, okay? All of them, they have been encoded in the Unicode, unlike ASCII that is just A to Z and 0 to 9. All the other ones. Now the issue is, when we now have Unicode, can we change the base of the computer? No, the base of the computer is still using ASCII. Now there needs to be a way of which you have to tell the computer that there are also other characters that are different from A to Z or 0 to 9. And we now said we need to now use Unicode. So for Unicode, they now started encoding it, encoding all those things so that the computer will be able to understand them. And they now came up with what we call the UTF-8 encoding system to represent the code, okay, to support many scripts across the world. Okay, it supports also ASCII as well. So you understand? So the base of the computer, or when we're talking about the internet, or when we're talking about what you have on the internet, is what we call the DNS, the domain name system. And before I explain DNS, let me explain how we get to DNS. For you to have a website, you need to have a domain name. Your domain name, for example, for Google is google.com. Google.com, as you know, is in A to Z, google.com. And remember I said the computer does not understand 0 to Z. It only understands zeros and 1. So there is something behind that google.com, the domain name, which is in numbers. We call them numbers. So it's an IP address. So there is something on the computer that converts name to numbers and numbers back to name. I hope you understand what I'm saying. It converts name to numbers and numbers back to name. And that is what we call the DNS system. For the internet to function, you need the DNS. The DNS is like one of the core of the internet itself. It's one of the core infrastructure of the internet. So the name conversion from name to number. So for example, if you have google.com, google.com can be 208.80.154.244. Okay? And that is what the computer, this 80, you know what I'm saying, is zeros and one. This 208 will convert it to zeros and one. For those of us who are doing engineering, you will know how to convert this to zeros and one. It's something simple. Just use base 2. Okay? But just for simplicity's sake, let's just say to understand numbers. For an actual sense, the numbers that you understand is just zeros and one. So for example, Wikipedia 208.80.154.244. If you type wikipedia.org on your browser, it will take you to Wikipedia page. But behind the scene, the computer will convert it to the IP address. If you also enter the IP address, the computer has the ability to convert it to the name. So we call it the domain name system, and that is the one of the core of the internet itself. Then if you now look at the structure of these domain names, I said, for example, google.com. The .com itself is what we call the top level domain, TLDs. It's something I'm sure maybe you might have been hearing about, okay? It's what we call the top level domain. So the top level domain originally all these ones are called the top level domains, .com, .org, okay, .edu. Those are top level domains. We now call them generic top level domains because they are generic. .com, .org, .edu. Those are generic top level domains. We have some type of other top level domains. For example, .gh, that's Ghana. Okay, we call those ones country code top level domains, CCTLDs. But now let me go back to history. When the internet first started, the internet was designed such that top level domain can only take 3 characters. Anything above 3 characters, it cannot take it. .com, 3 characters. .edu, 3 characters. .org, 3 characters. That was how the internet was designed originally. Okay? Moving away from that top level domain, we have what we call the second level domain. So for example, if you have a university in Ghana, it can be University of Ghana. Okay, it can be, for example, something University of Ghana.gh. So the University of Ghana there is the second level domain. But I'm not going to go so much into that. Just know that we have the top level domains. And when you now want to create your own domain, for example, you have GhanaSIG.com as an example. Once you have a domain, you can also create what we call the email address. Okay? So for example, if your domain is GhanaSIG.com, then I can create an email to say Raymond@GhanaSIG.com. So there will be a mailbox that stands before the @ That's Raymond. I know that is Raymond's mailbox. At GhanaSIG, I know Raymond is part of GhanaSIG. That means it's part of that domain. .com. Okay? And those are the things. We now felt that is the structure of the email addresses. For example, my email address is Oloyede Abdulkarim @unilorin.edu.ng. Meaning, once you see that email, you know that I am part of University of Ilorin. University of Ilorin is the organization .edu.ng. That is the top level domain. Okay? But as things evolved, and now let me also mention, there is one organization across the world that is in charge of domain names. So if you want to get a domain name, ICANN is the only organization that assigns domain names. But they don't do it directly. They do it through what we call the registrars. So they have the registrars and registry. That is also something maybe you might have been hearing about, but it's a discussion for another day. So they do it through the registrars in terms of the domain names. So we have the top level domain. Okay, TLDs, like I mentioned earlier. that are 3 characters. But as things move on, they now say, why are we restricting ourselves to 3 letters? Why can't we have more than 3 letters? And they now started having something like .help, okay, .airport, that are more than 3 letters. Now you now have domain names that are longer than 3 characters because ICANN approved it. What we are now saying is, all these things we're saying is only in ASCII character, .help, okay? But we are saying we don't want it just in ASCII characters. We also want it to be used in Mandarin language, for example, in the Japanese language, for example, those characters that I was talking about earlier, that we want to have domain names in those characters, because those people that uses it, they will be able to have a feeling that the internet belongs to them. So I hope you understand. And that is how things has now evolved. That we're now saying, and that is what led us to universal acceptance. Meaning we want our domain names to be in any character. You can see that I didn't say in any language, in any character. Any character that you want to use. Once you have the character, you put the character together, they form a language. So it's character that forms language. Any character at all. Is it in the Japanese? Is it in the whatever it is? Is it in English? Or is it in your language that has a dot underneath the E or whatever it is? And that is how things are now involved. So we now said email address internationalization also is for you to be able to have a domain name that is internationalized, and at the same time you'll be able to have an email address that it is. There are some language, I don't know, for those of you that know Arabic, Arabic is even worse. Conventionally, we write from left to right. Arabic writes from right to left. So we want to tell the computer that if I'm writing in Arabic, for example, the computer should be able to understand that I am writing from right to left, not from left to right. And things like that. And that is what got us about universal acceptance. And like I said earlier on, the domain name system is actually only in ASCII character. So we now came up with what we call the PIN code. The PIN code is for us to be able to convert ASCII character to the Unicode. Okay? So anything on the DNS, like I said, is entirely based on ASCII. The DNS runs on ASCII. It cannot run on Unicode. And in order for us to now move on, we now came up with what we call the PIN code. So the PIN code is basically just a conversion, okay? A conversion of those ASCII characters into Unicode characters. That is what the PIN code is all about. So PIN code is just like that conversion. So we came up with what we call the PIN code, and the PIN code is just to convert that thing so that the computer will be able to do that on the DNS. So how does that work? We now have 2 types of label. Number one is what we call the A label. Okay? The A label is the one we have before, the ASCII code, and we now came up with what we call the Unicode, the U label. Okay? So there is now a conversion of that Unicode, and that is what we now came up with in order for us, for the DNS to be able to use both ASCII and Unicode. Now that is being done, okay, internationalized domain names. We want to have domain names in different characters, okay, in different alphabets, and all these things. That is what we want to have, okay? And that is what took us to universal acceptance. To say that what we want is that every character is being represented by the domain names. So the goal of universal acceptance is that all computer systems and applications should support standards that treat all the top-level domain names in a consistent manner, allowing for generation of greater linguistic freedom and the choice of domain names and email addresses. And that is what universal acceptance is all about. And universal acceptance, there is what we call the Universal Acceptance Steering Group that came out of ICANN that started in 2015. Leading this campaign to say that we want our domain names to be in any character, so that people will have that understanding that we own the internet, like you mentioned when we started this this session, that for everybody to feel a feeling, to have that feelings that we own the internet, just like you mentioned, then the internet must be able to speak my language. The internet must be able to do everything in my characters. And that is what came up with the Universal Accessible Steering Group. So UASG is a community of global group of volunteers and contractors that work together to create research, we create code, application materials, and other tasks necessary to generate a meaningful change in this area. So we came together to now form the Universal Acceptance Steering Group. I must tell you, the Universal Acceptance Steering Group is going through some kind of reform at this moment. Okay, ICANN itself, because USG is under ICANN, and ICANN felt there is a need to reorganize this organization. So if you're looking at it now, in terms of what we are doing, it is still what we're going to be doing. But in terms of leadership, in terms of the political structure, everything is changing gradually. So some key reasons why universal acceptance is important: compliance with contemporary technical standards, freedom of choice, okay? And all these things, that is why it is important, prevention of customers. And one thing you might be asking me, that why is this important? This is very, very important, especially in what we call the digital economy, the global community. It is very important because, for example, if I have an email address in my Arabic character and I send you an email, if your own system is not universally ready, then that email is going to bounce back. And that is why it is not just because the internet. And once my email bounces back, I have two options. It's either I go and create another email address, okay, or I decide to say, you know what, I'm not sending this person email again. And if it is a business opportunity, that person loses out on that business opportunity. Then we are saying the world is now a global community. If it is truly a global community, then you'll be able to get business from somebody that does not speak English, Mandarin, for example, okay, and on the internet. But if your system is not ready, and we're going to go through what we mean by readiness of your system, then you will not be able to have access to these people, even if you are using the ASCII characters. So the USG, we have different working groups under the USG. The idea is to oversee the standard application, the EAI, the measurement, communication, the local initiatives. These are working groups under the USG. And now let me now go through what we are now saying for a system to be universally accepted, to be ready. Okay? When we are saying a system is universally acceptance ready, then the system must be able to accept, validate, store, process, and display. Accept, that means it must accept any character, not just ASCII characters, not just the A to Z, 1 to 9. The system must be able to accept it. It must be able to validate. There are times that you need to validate an email. When you are sending an email, you need to first of all do validation. It needs to be able to validate it. It needs to be able to store it and process it. And it needs to be able to display it exactly the way it is, not displaying it in English character. Do you understand? And those are the things, those are the steps that for a system to be universally acceptance ready. So for you, it is important that you ensure that whoever your provider is, or if you are the provider, to ensure that your system is universally acceptance ready. That is a topic for another day. How do you do it? This is just an awareness for you to understand it. Okay? If any of the steps is missing, then there's going to be a failure. It must be able to accept, validate, store, process, and display. For example, this is an Arabic email address. If you enter it into a mailing list now, it might give you this, please enter a valid email address. But this is a valid email address. But the fact that it's written in Arabic, the system is saying it is not valid. But it's actually a valid email address. And like I mentioned earlier, there are two problems with Arabic. Arabic is written from right to left. So the computer does not even understand which one is before the at and which one is after the art, because it's not UA ready. Okay, universal acceptance is getting there gradually. We're now moving on. We're now having systems that are UA ready, and this is just some of it. Some of the domain names are UA ready. And one thing that you need to understand is, for us to have a system that is UA ready, the engineers need to do some engineering work on the back end of the computer. And this is just one example of it. That for those of you that are doing programming, when you are doing programming, don't program such a way that you are saying the top level domain is just 3 characters. Don't program such a way that you cannot accept Unicode. Don't program, and those are the ways that you do your programming. For those of us who are doing programming, for businesses, you need to ensure that when you are subscribing, okay, you are using what is up to date, universal acceptance ready. Government also, it's important for government to understand this too, that they need a website that is UA ready, so that people across the country, when they are speaking the same language, they'll be able to communicate with each other. Then civil society too needs to tell it. We need to tell these stories to everybody, that we need a system that is UA ready. We need to do that. Then the major one, or one of the key components, is with the technical community. The technical community needs to ensure that the system is actually UA ready. It is very, very, very important. This is something that is very, very important for the technical community. And the technical community needs to find a way around this to ensure that the system is actually UA ready. Okay? They need to carry out some tests. They need to ensure that when they are doing the design, they are doing the design in such a way that they know that the system will be UA ready, UA compliant. So those are the things that has to be done. And that is what we're talking about when we're talking about universal acceptance. Now, how did the universal acceptance starting group, how did it start? It started, like I mentioned, through ICANN, okay, which is the internet, which is the ICANN, which is the one that manages what we call all domain names. So like I mentioned earlier, ICANN manages all domain names. That is the only organization across the globe that manages all domain names. And like I said, they don't do it directly. They do it through their registrars and registries across the globe. So you might know some of them. An example, the popular one, GoDaddy, okay, is an example of one of those registrars that gives domain name. So you want a domain name, you can go to somebody like GoDaddy, which is an accredited registrar of ICANN. And I'm sure there are a lot of other accredited registrars. So for you to have a system UA ready, okay, you need to update and support both the short and the long one. It needs to support the ASCII characters, okay? It needs to ensure that it supports the ASCII character and Unicode, not just the ASCII characters. Then you need to also to be able to update your services so that non-ASCII characters is going to be represented, the A label, okay? So you can look at this on the ICANN. So in terms of the next steps and the community support, the USG is working across the globe, and that is why I'm giving this presentation to you again today to tell you more about universal acceptance. So please, you need to go and look at the website, which is called the usg.tech. Look at it, and if you have any question, the floor is open for question and answer. Thank you very much. So this is the end of my presentation. Now we go to question and answer.
Please, I would like to see the slide before the last slide. There's some information I was speaking from there.
This one?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for your presentation. As we will say it back home, Eshe Pupo. My name is Olabimpe Adeloro, and
I should have used Yoruba as an example then.
I know, right? And you know, funny enough, during our online training, my group had this presentation. Universal acceptance was our project for presentation. And coincidentally, one of my bosses is doing it. Hope you are doing okay, sir.
I'm fine, thank you so much.
Awesome, well done. So now my question is, as we know, changes could be very challenging for humans. We like staying where we are. And one of the challenges we have with being UA ready is not with the end users. It's usually with the technical people. So is there anything that you guys are doing at your end to, I don't know if it would be right to use that word, impose being UA ready on technical people, governments, and others involved to assist the end users? Because as an end user, my own is to just put my domain name, to put my email, that's all I know. So whatever goes behind the scene is none of my business. So, but these ones that should help me, most time not willing to yield. They just want to stay where they've always been. So is there anything being done from your end as a community to assist the end users, kind of imposing the right thing on them?
Thank you for that wonderful question. Yes, and that is one of the things I'm doing today. We are taking advocacy not just to end users, but to the technical community. Like I was saying, I'm not doing a technical presentation today. If we were speaking to the technical community, we'll have gone through a more technical presentation with them for them to be able to understand the importance and why they need to change. So it is all about advocacy, and that is why we have universal acceptance ambassadors. We have a number of us in Africa that are universal acceptance ambassador. I know there are 2 in Nigeria. I know there is 1 in Morocco. I know there is 1 in Benin, okay, that has been appointed as universal acceptance ambassador. I know there is 1 in South Africa too. And what we are doing as UA ambassador is we're talking to people, talking to communities, trying to make them understand this thing and trying to get them to change. So do we have any other question? I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Yes, please, there's another question.
Thank you very much, Doc. I actually placed this on the online platform, so I wanted to know how can outdated email validation systems, like those shown in your, I think, one of your slides, the JavaScript example, that it can be systematically addressed across African digital platforms to ensure UE compliance. So it's already, the question is on the page as well.
Yeah. Like I said, it has to be done by the technical community. Then if an email is not UA ready, there are some things that has to be done. It is about the programming, and it depends on the language the programmer has used. Okay, so they will go back to the programming language and edit some things behind, and that is the only way it can be done.
Hello.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. So I'm aware and I have a question. I want to know, is there a way for university tech labs to partner with UA initiatives or contribute to UA awareness campaign?
Yes, there are lots of opportunities. Every year we have what we call the UA Day. The UA Day is a day that we create awareness across the globe about this issue of universal acceptance. ICANN fund a number of the UA days across the globe, but everybody can partner okay, and organize their own UA day. It is allowed. Is there any other question?
Doc, please, there's a question online.
Okay.
And it reads, before Unicode, when we used to use ASCII characters, how did the internet used to operate for society that other characters other than ASCII characters?
It doesn't work for them. They just have to use the English character. So before then, they have no choice. They just have to use the English character. So they are forced to learn English. And that is why we said, and that's why a lot of people are not using the internet today, because they are not speaking English, they are forced to use English, and that is why it wasn't working for them before.
Okay, we have our last question.
Hi, Doc. I trust you're well. And so my question is very simple. Are there global benchmarks or certifications for UA that developers can aim for?
Not really certifications, okay? But it's just for them to go and relearn. For example, when you are writing programs, you need to understand that don't use ASCII characters. Use a database that is Unicode, that has Unicode in it. Don't use, because when you are doing programming, you have to go and pick from a database. Don't pick from a database that has just ASCII. Use the Unicode. So those are just the things. There is no certification per se, because they are just little change. Then when you are doing the programming, don't tell the computer that the top level domain is just going to be the 3 letters. Tell it that it can be varying letter. Those are just the kind of changes that needs to be made.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity.
Okay.
Yeah, is a follow-up question to our question.
Yeah.
Then you were talking about we have those that are ambassadors, UA ambassadors, and all. So how can one become one, or maybe join the community?
Yes, everybody can become a UA ambassador, or anybody. If you want to become a UA ambassador, you need to apply through ICANN. And like I mentioned earlier, ICANN is restructuring the entire USG thing at the moment. So no application is being taken at the moment for more UA ambassadors. So you need to just apply through ICANN.
Okay, Doc, we have our last question.
Okay.
Hello, Doc. So this is a follow-up to the last but one question. If there are no accreditations or such, if you are a developer and say you develop a piece of software that is UA ready, how then do people know that it is UA ready? Are there no badges or so that you can put on to signify or show?
Yep. Yes, there is none. Okay. But the way you know is by testing it. So if you go onto the USG website, there is a test you can do. If you put your email address there, it will be able to tell you if your email address is UA ready. If you go to usg.tech/test, you'll be able to test that your website is actually UA ready or not, or your email address. Your email address actually that is checking for. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Abdulkarim. Your section was very insightful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
So in 2 minutes, can somebody round up what Dr. Abdulkarim said.
Sorry, before you round up, let me just say thank you so much for listening, and I hope to meet you guys one way or the other in future. Thank you.
Thank you too.